Welcome to Geo Sepharad Virtual Conversations Exploring Sepharad. And today we're in beautiful Albarracin, where we had the opportunity to come and visit these walls, the streets, the Jewish quarter, the churches, thanks to the book Lamps of Albarracin that was authored by our friend Edith Scott Saavedra. And this is amazing that we are studying the stones, the walls, the buildings, the synagogues, the streets, the villages, and the ruins to put all these Jewish quarters on the map so that people can find them. And also, we are finding the people that have experiences in those cities to bring the stories, the history, the cultural value, the educational value, and the experiences that these people have there in the past and today. And this is why we have here our friend Edith Scott Saavedra, that she is going to explain to us why a historic novel like The Lamps of Albarracin is very important to understand how people from three different cultures lived together before the arrival of the Inquisition. So welcome, Edith, to our virtual conversation.
Jose, you're an expert in technology information management, and you use geosatellite imaging to bring us new knowledge of the Jewish quarters of medieval Iberia. You use complex technology to generate new knowledge about a specific place and how it was at a specific time in the past. Now, from my point of view, you and I are kindred spirits, because for me, writing historical fiction of the highest quality has many similarities to what you do. So as an author, I generate new perspectives and a new understanding of a particular place and time in the past. And we both rely on artifacts, city walls, surviving buildings, maps, historical records. As an author, I also need to penetrate the invisible, the lived human experiences, the emotions, decision-making, sensations. And in writing The Lamps of Albarracin, I had a big challenge because I was taking focus on a very precious society that had been blown to bits. I was seeking the experiences of people whose voices had been silenced, people who were expelled from their homeland, people who stayed but were forced to forget their own heritage. The surviving historical archives were created by the powers that had oppressed the voices of these people and erased their stories. So I felt at times like a surgeon doing reconstructive surgery on a society. Thanks to the work of historians in Spain and elsewhere, in particular, Professor Miguel Ángel Motis, I was able to consult historical records at the local level, and I sought to bring to life the Jews, Muslims, Judeo-conversos, Mudejares, and other people of mixed heritage and faith who together with Christians formed a society of Aragon at that time. And to do this, I needed all the multidisciplinary training I'd received during my 7 years of studies at Harvard University in the social sciences, law and jurisprudence, literature and music. I needed all these abilities and more to look deeply at the historical records and cultural artifacts and be able to relate with confidence what was actually happening to this society and these people. One of the most interesting challenges in looking at the archives was applying my academic skills to ascertain what had been omitted. What would have been happening that wasn't reported? What was said that the authorities tried to silence? And to me, it's very meaningful to give voice to persons whose voices and beliefs have been repressed. So my readers will hear these voices in dialogue throughout my novel. The dialogue incorporates actual statements made by victims of the Inquisition, and I fit them very naturally into the story. What's my novel's value for educators, professors? Well, I mean, naturally, university students will need to immerse themselves in the culture and history of the time, the great literature, music, and arts, primary, secondary, and tertiary historical sources, and the larger economic and geopolitical context that's so important in this example. As a historical novelist with a multidisciplinary toolbox, I've created a novel that's an experience. The reader lives and breathes the air, landscape, fragrances, experiences all the senses, but also perceives the changes and the dangers in the air. From the vast landscape of medieval Aragon, I choose a landing point for the reader and a course of discovery that will lead them straight to a point of inflection in the history of the Spanish Inquisition. And this landing point is the Jewish quarter or Juderia of Albarracin, which you have mapped and visited. So our efforts are so complementary. They fit together to help students re-enter that world and find meaning in it for today.
After reading your novel, I got motivated to go to Albarracin in the middle of the pandemic. We had to cross from the Valencian community to Aragon and went there, and we were all day. And it was so beautiful that I have to tell you, we were able to experience the fragrance, the views, and the sound from the river. It was an amazing day, and we had to go back to know more about these walls, the churches, and go around the trails until the cave of the Jews. Can you imagine a small cave outside? and find where the cemetery was and all these details. So we're coming back to Aragon. This is why I want to ask you, why do you decide to place the action in the Kingdom of Aragon?
In the 15th century in Aragon, we find examples of the three faiths living together to a very high degree, among the highest anywhere in Iberia and Europe at the time. And this multiculturalism resulted in the flowering of an extraordinarily rich culture in the early Renaissance. You know, innovations, for example, in printing books, and the decision of the Catholic monarchs to build a Catholic nation state collided with this. This was a huge catastrophe. And with the expulsions of the Jews and later the Muslims, it would result in the destruction of a diverse, innovative, and creative society. The Crown of Aragon was a major power in Europe in the 1480s. You know, today, Aragon is a region in Spain. I think it accounts for around 3% of GDP. But the territory of this kingdom, this dynastic alliance in the 1480s, stretched from the border with Castile in Iberia to the coast, including Barcelona, Valencia, Sagunto, and across the Mediterranean as far as Sicily and Naples. And at this time, you know, this was before Christopher Columbus's first voyage. The Mediterranean sea trade was it. It was at its peak in terms of its importance to all of Europe. It was big. And Aragon, including its capital city, Saragossa, was a major locus of control. And the leading Sephardic Converso families of Aragon controlled a big share. This meant wealth and influence.
I want to know more about Aragon and the influence in the Mediterranean Sea, because we are also researching about the routes of the Sephardists at sea, how they went from Spain to Italy to Africa, and finally came to across to the Atlantic Ocean, because my family went from Spain, Holland to Curacao, Venezuela. So for me, crossing the Atlantic, finding about Columbus is also very important. But tell me, how Aragon was of influence on the Mediterranean Sea?
Yes, Jose, because you know, after 1492, those trade routes are going to stretch out far across the globe. Yeah, we're talking about the 1480s, and we look at that point, that was the early Renaissance, actually. And there'd been so much economic growth in the preceding few centuries in the Mediterranean. So the Jews of Aragon had played a major role in the rise of Aragon as a trading power. I mean, full stop. We got to focus on this. King James I of the Crown of Aragon had put Jewish experts in direct control of managing his royal treasury, because he knew that trade was the big opportunity. And how was he going to wrest some of that, grab some of that away from the really powerful Italian city-states that were so strong in commerce? And you know, the Jewish experts of Aragon were so successful in taking business from their Italian competitors that the Pope in Rome sent a letter complaining about them to the king. How's that? Okay. And by the time my novel takes place, a couple hundred years later, the 1480s, many of these influential Jewish families were converting to Christianity under pressure from the Catholic monarchs. And they became the so-called Judeo-conversos, or converts. Now, the leading families of these Judeo-conversos occupied top positions in the royal court of Aragon, you know, in finance, in judicial authority, for example. So for these reasons, it was a shock to them when King Ferdinand, the Catholic king, sent the Spanish Inquisition into his kingdom, the Kingdom of Aragon, for the first time. The year was 1484. I think the month was May of 1484. The city that really stands out for its diversity and unity that was going to receive this shock, for me, it's the city of Teruel in southern Aragon. And in Teruel, leading Christian, Muslim and Jewish families lived in mansions along the same street as next door neighbors. And I believe, Jose, you've been there and you've actually seen streets where this living together was happening. So when the Inquisitor was sent to Teruel for the first time and came to the city gates and blew his trumpet, he had a surprise waiting for him because the leading families of Teruel knew he was coming. And when this Inquisitor, Solivera, arrived with his party of executioners and hangmen at the gates of Teruel, they came dragging nooses. The town council refused them entry because Teruel saw itself as a united city and rose up to defend all its residents regardless of faith. The city actually sent a letter to King Ferdinand explaining His Majesty was wrong to send the Inquisition because the judgment of souls is reserved to God at the end of time. And to my knowledge, this is the only time in the history of the Spanish Inquisition where a city not only dared to deny His Majesty's moral authority, but sent a letter telling him that he was wrong. And the Catholic kings reacted with a scorched earth response. Inquisition and the kings, they punished the Judeo-Converso leaders of the city, replaced the city council. Leading members of Teruel's Judeo-Converso community were burned at the stake in the market square, either in person or in effigy. The remaining Jews, there were only a few at that time, left the city, and the Judeo-Conversos assimilated. So this great story of resistance, of commitment to the values of living together, pluralism, was suppressed, almost forgotten, very intentionally suppressed. And this is a very important reason why I chose Teruel and its neighbor, Albarracin, as the location for my novel, to give this heroism the attention it deserves.
And this is why we went to Teruel too, to find out the different cultures there. And we found these incredible Mudéjar towers next to the churches and next to a Plaza de la Judería, the Jewish Quarter Plaza. We were able to see the different cultures living together. Now we have been moving from the past to from the history to your interest in preserving this knowledge, these experiences. I want now to bring you us to the present and to the future. What we want to do with this novel, what actions are you taking to introduce this novel as a teaching tool in our communities?
The first step in influencing education is communication. So for the past 3 years, now that I've been based in Boston in the USA, because I wrote the novel actually in the Republic of Singapore, where I had been living. So since I arrived in the US after 23 years in Asia, I have been bringing the story of Sephardic and multicultural Aragon to audiences around the world. And my historical novel is the vehicle for this outreach. And the response is excellent. International interest is growing so fast. You know, the world is coming together as a result of the drivers of globalization, e-communications in particular, and thousands of persons of Sephardic descent living around the world are now able to come together on online platforms. You know, and Jose, you're part of this, a catalyst for this wonderful convergence that I've seen, you know, take shape just over the past 3 to 4 years. So my talks have been hosted online by the American Sephardi Federation in New York and Israel, the Hadassah Brandeis Institute in Boston, and the Jewish Heritage Alliance in Miami. Also Facebook groups such as Our Sephardic Family, and of course, Geo Sefarad, today's host. Now, these groups have global reach. Their members are climbing, you know, every day. And these events in which I featured have already attracted 2,000 registrants from dozens of countries, and this number is climbing. And Jose, I am so thrilled that you are taking so many initiatives, including this bilingual initiative in which, you and I are making content available bilingually in Spanish and English, because it does really extend our reach. So an important moment was when the lamps of Albarracin attracted the attention of Professor Dalia Wassner of Brandeis University. And she told me that the head librarian at Brandeis loved the novel. Now, Professor Wassner featured my work on an international broadcast event. And we decided to make it really thematic and bring in a panel that would be cross-cultural, cross-country. So I invited Professor Lucia Conte of the University of La Pompeu Fabra, Barcelona, who presented at our panel, Jose, and also Professor Miguel Ángel Motis, who is very supportive of this initiative. And our focus was on Aragon and the woman of Sepharad. Now, this event alone attracted more than 700 registrants from around the world. Also, Drora Arusi, who's the director of the Jewish Institute of Jewish Experience in Jerusalem, contacted me to discuss the potential role of my novel in educating Sephardic students around the world about their own heritage and history, going back to Spain. And she featured my work on her series, and that started me thinking about the novel as a teaching tool at the university level. To spread the idea, I created my educational short film, that's bilingual in English, The Lamps of Albarracin, Resistance to the Inquisition, which does narrate very movingly to images this episode of resistance at Teruel. And Montserrat Fernandez, one of our panelists in a recent event, she launched my short film at her course, which was an advanced placement or university level Spanish culture and literature course at a public or state high school near me. And I participated, and it was a big success with the students. They had such great questions. And at our final event, Montse has shared this with you, and Professor Carlos Miguel Puello of Valparaiso University in Indiana wrote me that he saw potential in my novel as a teaching tool. So he joined our panel, and he's actually preparing to teach my novel starting in 2 weeks. So my goal is for the Lamps of Albarracin to be taught at universities in Spain and the USA as part of Spanish literature and culture courses and Jewish studies, Jewish history courses, because it's essential for students to know the importance of the Kingdom of Aragon when the three faiths did live and work together, and for our students to be familiar with the culture and traditions of Sephardic and multicultural Aragon, which are such an important part of our heritage.
This is amazing how we can help you in introducing these topics using our media, like you say, for the others to know, not only to educators, but for families. Families need to know the Spain heritage and see how many people now, like me, are able to come back to Spain as a Spaniard after 500 years, thanks to the 215 Sephardi that approved the nationality to those families of Sephardi origin. For me, it's a privilege to do that. But now that we know what Edith wants us to do, we need to activate our forces to continue reading this book, sharing her stories, sharing the places, not only of the big Jewish quarters, but also of the small, forgotten, and unknown Jewish quarters that we have in Spain and Portugal. Thank you. We have many questions that we can ask in another opportunity to Edith Scott if we do another panel with another group of people, this time in English, so we can continue these virtual conversations exploring Sepharad. Thank you for coming, and continue following Geo Sepharad. See you next time.